I don't remember the taste of the food that night. I couldn't tell you what song was playing or how many people were there. But I remember the sound of my husband's voice, clear, deliberate, and the way the room paused to hear what he'd say next. He stood at the head of the table, one hand on his wine glass, the other resting casually in his pocket. Behind him, a string quartet played softly, their bows moving in perfect rhythm. Laughter echoed. Glasses clinked. The scent of vanilla candles mingled with roasted duck and garlic butter. It was the kind of night people post about. A celebration of a man adored by many. And I sat there, his wife, smiling for photos, offering small talk to his co-workers, adjusting the napkin on my lap like everything in my world hadn't been quietly unraveling for months. Ethan raised his glass. Everyone fell quiet. His mother beamed like he was giving a presidential speech. I leaned back just slightly, curious where he was going with it. He thanked the guests, complimented the chef. Then his eyes found mine. "I've had to accept something," he said slowly, "and it hasn't been easy." A dramatic pause. Someone whispered, "Is he getting emotional?" "I've had to come to terms with the fact that I'll never be a father, unless I adopt a baby, or marry someone fertile." And just like that, the air shifted. Some guests laughed, unsure if they were supposed to. Others froze. His best friend let out a sharp chuckle, then looked around nervously. A champagne cork popped from a distant table, but even that didn't break the tension. I smiled. Not because it was funny, not because I was okay, but because I'd learned how to perform. The pain? I kept it quiet. That lump in my throat? I swallowed it whole. My fingers dug into my thighs beneath the table, steadying me. My face never changed. I knew the cameras were still pointed at us. I knew Judith, his mother, was watching me from 2 seats down, waiting for my reaction like it was part of the entertainment. What they didn't know, what he didn't know, was that I hadn't come to celebrate him. I came to end him. Quietly, elegantly, without shedding a single tear. Because while he was preparing for his grand toast, I was preparing for something else, something final. And they were all about to witness it. If this is your first time coming across one of our stories, welcome. Please hit the like button and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. And don't scroll away, because what happened next, no one saw coming. I used to believe love could weather anything. That if 2 people were strong enough, committed enough, they could survive even the cruelest storms. But that was before infertility quietly moved into my marriage, setting up camp in the shadows of our once joyful home. My name is Rachel. I'm 36 years old. I've been married to Ethan for 7 years. We were college sweethearts, the kind who used to finish each other's sentences, laugh at inside jokes only we understood, and dream in unison about what our family would look like. For the first few years, everything was good. More than good. But once we hit year 4 and still had no baby, things started to crack in places I never expected. It began with hopeful whispers. "It'll happen soon." Then suggestions. "Maybe you're just stressed." And finally silence. The kind of silence that swells in a room and fills every crevice until it drowns out everything else. We tried. God knows we tried. First the ovulation kits. Then the timed intimacy. And then came the needles. I remember sitting in a cold hospital room while a nurse handed me another round of hormone injections. My fingers trembled as I held the syringe, staring at my stomach, trying to convince myself this was what hope looked like. 3 rounds of IVF. 1 miscarriage. A hollow kind of grief that clings to your ribs and refuses to let go. Each failed attempt carved something out of me. And every time I tried to reach for Ethan, to hold him, to cry with him, to find comfort in him, he'd pull further away. At first he told me it wasn't my fault. But slowly his words stopped coming altogether. He became distant, quiet, measured. He started sleeping with his back turned to me, like my touch carried a weight he didn't want to bear. He never said it, but I saw it in his eyes. He blamed me. And then there was Judith, his mother, the queen of passive aggression. "Oh, Rachel, I saw a onesie today with the cutest little giraffe. Maybe one day." Or, "You know, when I was your age I already had 2 boys climbing the curtains. Time flies." She never said it outright. But every comment was a dagger wrapped in lace. The worst part? Ethan never defended me. Not once. He just sat there, sipping wine or scrolling through his phone like he couldn't hear the invisible weight crushing my chest. I kept my pain private. I smiled when people asked, "So when are you two having kids?" I gave polite chuckles when colleagues joked about baby showers and diaper blowouts. But behind closed doors I broke. I broke in the shower. In the car. In the quiet hours of the night, when the only sound was the whisper of another pregnancy announcement on social media. I began keeping a journal. Not for the memories, but for the moments I didn't want to forget. The way Ethan flinched when I said the word fertility. The way he sighed when I asked if we could try again. The way Judith said, "Maybe adoption's your only option now. Or a surrogate if Ethan doesn't lose patience." There's a kind of loneliness that creeps in when the person you love most looks at you like you're broken. Not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, like you're a problem that can't be fixed. I felt like a failure in a house I helped build. That sentence circled my mind like a mantra. Not because I believed it, but because they did. And the worst part? I started to believe it too. But something inside me, something small but stubborn, refused to die. A whisper that said, "Not yet. Not like this. Not without a fight." And that whisper would soon become a roar. I started noticing the shift not all at once, but in the tiny dismissive moments that barely seemed worth mentioning, until they piled so high, I could no longer see the version of him I once loved. It began with silence, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that hangs in a room like fog, thick and impossible to ignore. Ethan stopped asking how I was feeling after treatments. He no longer offered to drive me to appointments. I would mention my next cycle, and he'd nod absently while scrolling through his phone. I convinced myself he was just stressed, that work was demanding. But even when he was home, he wasn't here. His body sat beside me on the couch, but his mind was always elsewhere. His laughter, once reserved just for me, now echoed through late-night phone calls I wasn't part of. He started working late. At first, it was a few hours here and there. Then it became routine. He'd leave early, come home after midnight, mumble something about back-to-back meetings, and disappear into the shower. I stopped asking questions, not because I didn't care, but because I already knew I wouldn't like the answers. At dinners with his friends, I'd sit there, sipping wine, while they exchanged jabs that were supposed to be jokes. "Man, I don't know how you do it. A whole house without toys? Must be nice. No screaming kids messing everything up. Bet you're saving a fortune on diapers and ballet recitals. Dude, if I were you, I'd just hit up a sperm donor and get it over with." And Ethan would laugh. Loudly. Sometimes he'd even add his own punchline. At this point, I'll take anything with 2 working ovaries and a sense of humor. He'd glance at me, expecting me to laugh too, like I wasn't the punchline sitting beside him. The first time I heard her name again was during one of those dinners. Claire. She was his ex before me. The one he claimed had been too intense. The one who'd wanted kids too quickly. I remember him telling me once, Claire treated motherhood like a mission. It was suffocating. I believed him. I didn't ask more. I should have. "She's doing good," he said casually, buttering his bread. 3 kids now. All boys. Still looks like a model. "We've been catching up." He said it like it meant nothing. Like this wasn't a woman he once nearly moved in with. Like her name didn't stick to the air like smoke. I stayed quiet. I watched. And then I started writing. At first it was a few notes in the back of a planner. A line here, a phrase there. But over time it grew. Page after page of quiet betrayals. His words, his actions, his absences. Things like, didn't show up for scan, told me I was too emotional again. Laughed when Judith said I should consider letting him go. The journal became my safe place. A record of the erosion. Proof for myself that I wasn't imagining the distance. Because sometimes gaslighting doesn't come in loud, angry arguments. It comes in the form of eye rolls, silences, and casual cruelties no one else witnesses. One night, I walked into the living room and found him on the phone. He was smiling genuinely, laughing, leaning back on the couch, speaking softly. "Yeah, I remember that. You always said that." "No, I never told Rachel that story." A pause. A chuckle. "Claire, stop. You're bad for me." He didn't notice me at first. He ended the call quickly when he did. "Just work stuff," he muttered. "New client." I didn't answer. I just nodded and went back to our bedroom, where everything had stopped feeling like ours. The final straw wasn't something loud or explosive. It was an invitation. Handwritten, on thick cream-colored stationery. From Judith. Sunday dinner, family only. 6 p.m. When I asked Ethan about it, he shrugged. Oh right. I forgot to tell you. She's hosting something small. Claire and the kids are coming too. I blinked. Claire and the kids? She ran into my mom at the farmer's market. They got to talking. You know how she is. Probably just wants to play matchmaker again. He laughed like it was cute. She knows we're married. He shrugged. She probably forgot. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how long I'd been invisible in my own life. How long I'd been fading without realizing it. I didn't go to the dinner. He didn't ask why. I think part of him was relieved. I think part of him was already gone. But I was still there. Watching. Remembering. Preparing. He didn't know it. But the moment he let another woman take my place at his mother's table, he made a choice. And so did I. The week after Claire appeared at Judith's dinner, Ethan walked into the kitchen and casually announced that he wanted to throw a huge party for his 40th. Not just a dinner or a backyard barbecue. Something extravagant. I want it to be unforgettable, he said, pouring himself coffee like he was speaking about someone else's celebration. I looked up from my tea and nodded. Let's make it happen. He didn't question the enthusiasm in my voice. He didn't notice how smoothly I agreed. And that was the moment I knew I still had the one advantage he never valued, his own underestimation of me. He gave me a list, the people he wanted to invite, the type of food, his favorite champagne. He even mentioned having a live band. I said yes to everything. I offered to handle the logistics. You work too hard, I told him, brushing his shoulder. Let me give you a night to remember. He smiled, kissed my forehead, and walked out of the room completely unaware that the woman standing in front of him had already filed a motion to remove him from the deed to the house. While he forwarded names for the guest list, I was forwarding documents to my attorney. While he picked out cake flavors, I was scanning through property agreements. While he texted back and forth with Claire under the name Mason in his phone, I was setting up consultations with the top women's clinic in the state, under a name I hadn't used in years, my maiden name. I booked the venue. A luxury rooftop restaurant downtown with skyline views and glass walls. He loved it. Everyone's going to lose their minds when they see this place, he said, beaming as I showed him photos on my tablet. Make sure there's a photographer, he added. I want people to remember this night. I made sure of that. I hired 2 photographers, one for the party, and one for surveillance. The second one followed him on a Thursday when he said he'd be working late. He wasn't at the office. He wasn't even in the city. He was 40 miles away, checking into a boutique hotel with Claire and her 3 boys. There were photos of him helping them out of the car, holding hands with the youngest, carrying a diaper bag, smiling. He had created a parallel life, one filled with the children he once claimed he never wanted. I printed the photos, all of them, slipped them into a leather-bound album. No captions, no commentary, just evidence. Carefully placed between decorative tissue paper, the guest list grew. His co-workers RSVP'd. Judith asked if she could give a toast. Even Claire's name appeared in the catering folder he accidentally left open on the kitchen counter. I didn't question it. I never asked why she was listed as a +1. I didn't need to. The silence served me better. While Ethan focused on party favors, I reviewed legal clauses with Michael. We timed everything precisely. The divorce filing would be processed in waiting. The house documents complete. My inheritance from my late father, money Ethan had no access to, would be safely sealed under a new trust. The last loose thread was my medical records, and I had already submitted everything for review at the women's clinic. A second opinion. A new round of testing. Private donor if needed. The science had changed, and I was done waiting for someone else to want it enough to fight with me. Every day felt like walking through fire with a painted smile. He kissed me in passing, texted me from work, sent me memes late at night. And I replied with warmth, affection, praise. I became the perfect partner, the thoughtful wife, the loving hostess. But every move I made was designed with precision. I arranged for his favorite band to play a surprise set. I booked a videographer to document the night. I printed custom menus with his name embossed in gold. Every detail was executed flawlessly. Because when it comes to endings, people only remember what happens in the final scene. I planned to give them a finale they wouldn't forget. He walked through the house one evening, whistling, holding a sample of the invitation card. "You really outdid yourself, Ratch," he said. "Seriously. I don't know what I did to deserve you." I smiled. But in my head, I wasn't picturing centerpieces or seating charts. I was picturing the look on his face when he realized everything he thought was hidden had been carefully laid bare. Because this wasn't just a birthday party. It was a farewell performance. And I was the one writing the script. I was ironing Ethan's suit when the envelope slipped from the inside pocket of his jacket. A white hotel invoice, dated just 2 nights before. The total was obscene. Far more than a solo stay could justify. My fingers trembled slightly as I read the line items. Suite with private balcony, in-room dining, late checkout. He hadn't even tried to hide it. No alias, no cash payment. His name printed in bold across the top, like a signature of betrayal. I slid the envelope back into the pocket and placed the suit gently on the hanger, careful not to crease a single thread. My face remained blank, but something inside me had shifted. Not shattered, solidified. The kind of stillness that only comes when denial finally dies. I called Megan that night. Not just a friend but someone who owed me a favor. She'd worked private security in the past, and knew how to gather information without leaving footprints. I didn't cry when I explained what I needed. I didn't scream or beg for sympathy. I just asked her to find the truth. All of it. Within days she delivered. Photos. Dozens. Clear. Undeniable. Ethan, walking hand in hand with Claire outside an ice cream parlor. Ethan, loading groceries into the back of her SUV, while one of her sons tugged on his shirt. Ethan, attending a school recital, seated between Claire and one of her children, clapping proudly. A life that ran parallel to mine. Only his smile looked different. Relaxed. Sincere. Familiar in a way I hadn't seen in months. I stared at the images for hours, not out of shock, but strategy. Every detail became a piece in the puzzle I was assembling. Their meeting spots. Their routines. The way he slipped out early on Saturdays, claiming golf or meetings. Megan even got audio of him saying it. Low, smug, unfiltered. "Claire gives me what Rachel can't." That sentence repeated in my head like a curse. I didn't react. Not outwardly. Not in front of anyone. Instead, I finished the party planning with even more care. I scheduled my hair appointment. I sent Claire a casual invitation to the event, signed personally by me, with a note, "So glad we've become close enough to celebrate together." Ethan never asked how she ended up on the guest list. He never asked because he believed I was incapable of confrontation. He had painted me into the corner of his mind labeled safe. The woman who cooked dinner, paid bills, smiled politely at his mother. He didn't realize I had been quietly withdrawing myself from every account we shared, rewriting my will, packing sentimental keepsakes in boxes under the guise of reorganizing. He told me once that secrets rot a marriage. But his secret hadn't rotted me, it had preserved me. I began to dress differently. Simpler. Bolder. I asked fewer questions. I smiled more. The less I reacted, the more he underestimated me. At night, while he slept beside me, I would stare at the ceiling and count backwards from 100. Not to fall asleep, but to measure how long I could lie next to a man who lived 2 lives. Megan discovered more. He'd been seeing Claire for almost a year. Since the anniversary trip he canceled because work was crazy. Since the night he came home late with cologne I didn't recognize. Since before the first fertility test, he told me not to stress too much about. A year of shared lies orchestrated with ease. He even had a drawer at her house. A toothbrush. A bottle of cologne. A photo of them with the boys framed on her nightstand. And Claire? She wasn't innocent. She knew about me. Judith made sure of it. There were text messages where they joked about me, how uptight I was, how weak I'd look if I ever found out. They didn't expect me to unravel. They expected me to fold. But I wasn't breaking. I was building. Silently. Patiently. Thoroughly. The rooftop venue confirmed final arrangements. The cake was on schedule. The band rehearsed a surprise rendition of his favorite song. Guests RSVP'd with excitement. Judith called to remind me she'd be bringing a friend she wanted Ethan to meet, some distant cousin of Claire's. I told her I couldn't wait. And the dress? The one I'd wear that night? It was nothing like what he'd seen me in before. It wasn't designed to impress him. It was tailored to announce something final. Something irreversible. He had built a castle of deceit. But I wasn't coming to knock on the door. I was bringing the storm that would take it all down. The room shimmered with golden candlelight, the clink of champagne glasses echoing softly beneath a jazz quartet. Waiters in black vests swept through the elegant crowd, topping off flutes and passing hors d'oeuvres. The skyline twinkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Ethan had spared no expense. His 40th birthday celebration was a spectacle, one that screamed perfection on the outside. I almost didn't go. I sat on the edge of our bed for nearly an hour, dress zipped, heels on, staring at the invitation in my hand like it was a weapon. But deep down, I knew this was exactly where I needed to be. I walked in precisely 20 minutes late, all eyes turned. I could feel the pause in conversations, the silent scan from head to toe. The dress I chose wasn't flashy, it was commanding. Sleek red, fitted like armor, with a neckline sharp enough to cut. My hair swept up, my smile carefully measured. I didn't seek him out. I let Ethan find me. He did, halfway through the evening. His eyes trailed over me with the kind of confusion only guilt could stir. A flicker of unease crept into his smile. "You made it," he said, arms wide, voice too loud, too rehearsed. "I wouldn't miss it," I replied, handing him the perfectly wrapped gift I knew he'd never open. Judith was already buzzing around with glasses in both hands, greeting everyone by name like royalty on parade. Claire stood in the corner, laughing a little too loudly with two of Ethan's coworkers. She was wearing gold. Always gold. Like she needed to be noticed. As the evening reached its peak, the lights dimmed slightly and a spotlight warmed the center of the room. Ethan grabbed the mic. "Can I get everyone's attention?" He grinned, already tipsy. "First, thank you. Seriously. 40 looks good when you've got this much love in the room." Polite applause. "And to my beautiful wife Rachel," he said, eyes grazing mine, "for putting all this together even though I know party planning isn't really her strength." Chuckles. "But hey," he continued, pacing now like a stand-up comic, "marriage is about compromise, right? Like I had to compromise on fatherhood." He sipped his drink dramatically. "I mean, unless I adopt or marry someone fertile." The room froze for a beat. Just a breath. Then nervous laughter began to spread. Judith barked out a shrill laugh, shaking her head as if he'd told a classic Ethan joke. Claire actually clapped, her hand landing on her chest like she couldn't believe how brave he was to say it out loud. I didn't flinch. I stood, lifted my glass slowly, turned to face the room, lips curled into a polite smile. But I said nothing. Not a word. I held their gaze one by one. Ethan, his grin faltering. Judith suddenly unsure. Claire, still half smiling but glancing toward Ethan for context. The silence stretched. Uncomfortable. I saw shoulders shift, eyes dart. Some thought I was too humiliated to speak. Others assumed I was composing a dignified exit. I simply raised my glass higher. "To Ethan," I said finally, my voice even. "You're right. You really are full of surprises." And I drank. Then sat down. No scene. I let the silence work for me. Let them fill the blanks with their own discomfort. Let them wonder. And they did. Every clink of a glass that followed was quieter. Every laugh a little more forced. Ethan looked like he wanted to rewind time, redo the moment, say something clever that would undo what he'd said. But the damage was already blooming across the room. He thought he'd embarrassed me. He didn't realize he'd exposed himself. Because while they were still chuckling at the punchline, I was already holding the knife behind my back, with every intention of waiting for the right moment to twist. What they didn't know was, I'd been busy too. While Ethan paraded his cruelty as comedy, I was quietly building an exit so clean, so sharp, it would feel surgical. The day after I found those hotel receipts, I walked into my lawyer's office with every journal entry, every photo Megan had captured, every whispered insult I'd documented. My attorney, a calm woman with eyes like steel and a voice that didn't rise or fall, slid the divorce papers across the table without blinking. "By the time he opens his birthday cards," she said, "he'll no longer be your husband on paper." I had him removed from the deed to our house, quietly, legally, because the house had always been mine, gifted from my father before he passed. Ethan had never paid a dime into it. But I let him pretend. Let him hang his art, renovate the kitchen, fill the rooms with expensive furniture and louder opinions. I let him believe he owned something that was never his to begin with. I updated my will. Had it notarized. Ethan gets nothing. Not the car, not the house, not even the dog we shared. Though let's be honest, he barely remembered to feed her. Meanwhile, while he was slipping away to hotels and rehearsing cheap jokes with Claire, I was sitting in a quiet clinic under soft lights, speaking in hushed tones with a fertility specialist who had a gentle smile and a sharp mind. He didn't promise miracles. He promised possibilities. Turns out, what we thought was our issue was never mine. New tests. New technology. The kind that hadn't been available a few years ago. They uncovered something Ethan had never been willing to test for. Something genetic. Something irreversible. And so I started a private journey. I took silent injections, monitored hormone levels. I met with a donor, one whose background matched my values, my heritage, my story. I did it alone. Quietly. Intentionally. Every time Ethan came home late with a faint perfume on his collar, I marked another milestone, another small victory on the path he didn't even know I was walking. While he whispered confessions to his ex in hotel rooms, I was choosing the name of a child he would never meet. While Judith pushed Claire into our lives like she was auditioning her for a daughter-in-law role, I was writing a letter to my unborn child explaining how silence, sometimes, is the loudest power a woman can hold. Just quiet steps, careful planning, and a timeline that was already unfolding beneath their feet. At the party when he made that cruel joke, when they laughed and clapped and waited for me to shatter, they had no idea I was already gone. I wasn't his wife. I was his reckoning. And the countdown had already begun. The room was still buzzing from the laughter when I stood up. The cake had just been rolled out, layers of gold-dusted fondant and sparklers shooting into the air like fireworks. People were clapping. Cameras flashing. Ethan was soaking it in like it was a coronation. His arm was casually draped around Claire's chair. My chair. I tapped my champagne glass twice. Not loud. Just enough. Enough to hush the noise. Enough to make every face turn toward me with curious smiles and polite attention. Ethan turned, a little smirk on his lips. Probably expecting another toast that would make him feel like a king. I cleared my throat softly and began, before we toast Ethan's 40th, I'd like to say something. Something personal. A few people leaned in. Phones lowered. I want to thank Ethan, I said, steady as stone. For freeing me. For reminding me how strong I actually am. For showing me the cost of silence, and the value of truth. And most of all, for helping me realize exactly who I never want to become. He blinked. The smirk faltered. A few eyes darted between us. I know this is unexpected, I continued, but so was discovering hotel receipts tucked inside a suit jacket. So was watching my husband lie with such fluency that even his mother smiled through it. So was learning that infertility jokes make excellent birthday entertainment, if you're heartless enough to deliver them. There were murmurs now. Chairs shifting. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a stack of envelopes. One by one, I handed them out, to his boss, to his brother, to two of his longtime friends. They opened them slowly. And then came the gasps. Photos. Clear, time-stamped, undeniable. Ethan and Claire. Entering hotels. Leaving them. Holding hands. Kissing in the back seat of a car. Someone dropped a fork. A woman stifled a scream. Judith, who had just lifted her glass, froze mid-sip. Her eyes widened then rolled back. She slumped in her chair. Someone shouted her name. A waiter rushed over. I didn't flinch. I didn't stay to watch Ethan's reaction, though I imagined it well, jaw tight, face pale, trying to salvage dignity in a room that now saw him for who he truly was. Instead I stepped back, smiled, and I walked out, just the rhythmic click of my heels on polished marble floors. One step after another. Head high. Let them clean up the mess. Let them gossip, speculate, explain. My part was done. And the silence I left behind? Louder than any revenge scream could ever be. The night I left Ethan's birthday party, I didn't go back home. Not to the house we shared. Not to the cold bed that had become a place of mourning long before betrayal carved its initials into my heart. I went straight to a quiet apartment I'd signed the lease on 2 weeks prior. Small, sunlit, with hardwood floors and a balcony that overlooked a park filled with laughter I hadn't heard in years. The key felt good in my hand. Solid. I unpacked slowly over the next few days, taking my time, letting the silence wrap around me like a balm instead of a punishment. I replaced our wedding photo on my desk with a framed quote. She remembered who she was and the game changed. And it did. Work noticed the shift in me. Or maybe they'd always seen the potential but waited for me to believe it too. My boss pulled me into her office one morning. "Rachel, your leadership this past quarter has been nothing short of exceptional. We'd like to promote you. Senior manager. Better pay. More autonomy. You deserve it." I nodded. I smiled. But inside I wept. Not for the promotion, but for every version of myself that had begged for scraps of praise in a marriage where I was always made to feel lacking. Then came the messages. Ethan, suddenly sober in more ways than one. I was drunk. It didn't mean anything. "She's not you. You know how much I love you. Come home." Each one buzzed my phone like a ghost tapping at a window I had already bricked shut. Then came the letter. Judith's handwriting, pristine as ever. Blue ink on cream paper. "Rachel, please think of your dignity. Public scenes solve nothing. What happened is regrettable. Yes, but marriage is about forgiveness. Keep your silence. Protect the family name. We've all made sacrifices." She ended it with a Bible verse and a request to Sunday dinner. I folded the letter neatly and dropped it in the recycling bin. No flames. Just closure. I didn't reply to either of them. I didn't need to. The silence was loud enough. And then, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, I got a call from the fertility clinic. Dr. Halvorson's voice was calm, but I could hear the smile she tried to contain. "Rachel, congratulations. Your most recent transfer took. You're pregnant." I sat on the edge of my bed, one hand over my stomach, still flat, still quiet, but no longer empty. I had left a marriage, lost illusions, shed lies like a snake shedding skin, and now alone but whole I was carrying life. Just me. And a future I had built brick by brick, in silence, in pain, in clarity. I closed my eyes and whispered, "We're going to be okay." As I finally believed it. I started talking to my unborn child before I even saw a bump. At first it was just whispers while brushing my teeth, small words in the morning light, soft confessions in the quiet of the evening. Then one day I picked up my phone, flipped the camera and hit record. "Hey little one, it's Mom." Felt strange calling myself that at first, a title that had been a source of pain, jokes, judgment and shame. But now it rolled off my tongue like honey. The videos weren't polished. Sometimes I cried in them. Other times I laughed at memories I never wanted to forget. I told stories, not just about what I was going through but who I used to be. "I once begged someone to stay," I said in one. "But someday I hope you know anyone worth having never makes you beg." I never intended to share those videos. But one night, curled under a blanket, I typed out my story, raw, unfiltered, and posted it anonymously on a women's support forum. Title: My husband mocked my infertility, but I gave him a birthday surprise that silenced the room. I went to bed without thinking much of it. But when I woke up, the screen was buzzing. Hundreds of comments, thousands of views. By the end of the day, it was viral. Messages poured in like waves after a storm. "You gave me courage. I left my cheating fiancé today. I finally told my in-laws no. I watched your story 5 times. It reminded me who I am." I read every single one. I sat in silence and cried. Not from sadness, but from the powerful realization that my voice had done what years of silence never could. It echoed. It reached. It healed. For others. And for me. In my journal, I wrote the truth I hadn't dared say aloud. I lost a husband. But I found my voice. I found my peace. And I found you. I pressed my hand against my belly, now barely showing, and smiled. "You are not born of shame," I whispered. "You are born of survival, of silent strength, of truth finally spoken." I kept recording the diary every week. Sometimes in pajamas, sometimes with swollen eyes, sometimes with a glow I didn't recognize. And with every word, every entry, every heartbeat, I reclaimed the parts of me I thought he'd broken. And I started to dream again. Not of fairy tales, but of a quiet morning, a tiny hand wrapped around my finger, a giggle echoing off the kitchen walls. Of a life built on truth, not pretense. Of a home where I would never again have to shrink to fit. This child would never hear me whisper apologies for existing. Only affirmations. Only love. Only strength. The room is quiet now. Golden hour spills through the sheer curtains, painting the walls in a soft, honeyed glow. The only sound is the gentle creak of the rocking chair beneath me. Back and forth. Slow. Steady. Safe. My hands rest gently over the curve of my belly, feeling the life I once feared I'd never carry. There's peace here. Not the kind people pretend to have at parties or post about in captions. No, this peace was earned. Came through fire. Through public humiliation and private heartbreak. Through the cold hands of betrayal and the warm grip of silent resolve. There were nights I wept into pillows, afraid no one would ever hear me, afraid my story would end with apologies and compromises I could never live with. But I didn't fold. I didn't shatter. I rebuilt. And now, in the same body once mocked for being barren, life moves, grows, thrives. My baby kicks softly as if to remind me I'm here. And I smile, not out of spite, but out of power, because he will never get to know this child. He forfeited that right the day he turned my pain into a punchline. The day he gave my seat to another woman and laughed like I was disposable. Now he texts, he begs, he apologizes. But the door he walked through closed behind him, and I threw away the key. Judith? She tried to rewrite the story in a letter, called it a misunderstanding, asked me to protect the family's dignity, but dignity doesn't come from silence. It comes from truth, from standing tall when they expect you to crawl, from choosing yourself, not once, but every single day. I reach for the phone and hit record one last time. The lens focuses on my face, older, wiser, softer in places, steel in others. My name is Rachel. I was mocked, betrayed, dismissed, and underestimated. But I didn't disappear. I documented. I healed. And I built a future without the ones who tried to bury me. The camera pans slightly, framing the round of my stomach. Then I speak the last words I ever planned to say about him. He mocked my infertility in public, but he'll never get to meet the child I fought for in private. I end the video. And just like that, it's no longer his story. It's mine. And it always will be. He shattered my heart with cruelty, but I rebuilt a life he'll never be part of. If this story left a mark on you, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed. Because more true stories of strength, betrayal, and silent revenge are coming your way. And don't just watch. Join the conversation below. I want to hear what you would have done.